And now I'd like to introduce Tony's colleague and friend at the New York Times, Jack MacKenzie.
Thanks for saving the water. Thank you, Vance. Marky, Jenny, Vice President, everybody else. I'm going to demonstrate why I was in print. I can't even. Well, I'm doing that. I don't charge you with this time for the time. You mentioned the shape of the bench and where people sat. And I was privileged to sit in one of those front row seats, which was really quite privileged. And that lasted for years. And they even had the Slim opinions downstairs they waited for me. And when Warren Burger became the Chief Justice, I was right under his jowl. And I looked up at him, and he looked down at me, and I didn't have to, he couldn't have spoken this. He said, with his eyes, "What the hell are you doing here?" And shortly after that, they changed the shape of the bench so that those seats were eliminated. They had a good reason. The reason was the justices couldn't hear each other. And they kept they interrupted each other anyway, but they had less of an excuse if they saw that somebody was speaking. So that was a privilege that Tony had, we all had. Such is the fame of Tony Lewis that he nearly eclipsed his own reputation as the revolutionizer of Supreme Court coverage. Over the 32 years of his demanding and passionate column writing, I encountered many who called themselves fans of Tony's, who had no memory of his revolutionary legal writing. And only faintly, that is aside from the human rights scope that he was in, the Supreme Court part of it, and only faintly recalled what his Pulitzer Prizes were about. The first was for exposing an ugly facet of McCarthyism, and the second was for his reporting on reapportionment. One writer has even criticized Adam Liptak's excellent obituary for leading with Tony's Supreme Court achievements rather than the columns that influenced his generation. I hardly agree with Adam's emphasis and hope that I can further balance out his reputation. I think I first encountered Tony in 1954, and by the way, there are a lot of personal references here. That's the point, I guess, that I was asked to speak about my experience with Tony. It's not too much about Gideon. I encountered him, his article in the Reporter magazine in 1954. It was about the Chazanow case that led to his Pulitzer Prize. And I was in the Navy at the time, and I'd been a student of McCarthyism from college, and I wanted to be involved in that fight, and I had a job as a copy boy at the Washington Post for a summer, then I went to the Navy. Anyway, I not only admired the story, I was deeply jealous of it, and I couldn't wait to get back to the Post and where they were fighting McCarthyism tooth and nail, and I got my old job back, still a copy boy. At the Post, Tony had a great admirer in Alan Barth, really the greatest editor, whoever lived, and another hero of mine. And I think I first saw Tony in person one day in '62 or '63, when I was walking, strolling actually, right up to the Supreme Court, and for a day to help out on the caseload. And Tony simply ran from behind, ran right by me, kept running up to the Supreme Court. And I kept walking, and I said to myself, hey, He's got 2 Pulitzers, and he's running, and I'm just walking. Tony's reporting of justice issues was already high grade and sophisticated when Scotty Reston, pressed by Justice Felix Frankfurter to improve the Times' Supreme Court coverage, assigned him to the court after the year he had at Harvard Law School on a Neiman. On his return, Tony's scholarship was just hit the ground running, and his authority and scholarship quickly showed up in the paper's columns. Frankfurter, the famous meddler and provocateur, wasn't through, and for Washington, he may know this or he may not know this, but he then went to work on Phil Graham, to having converted the Times. And a few years later, Phil acted, and he called up to Creighton, who was covering the lower courts, and said, "I decided, Jim, are you here? You're supposed to be here. If he's not, I'm sorry." He said, "Creighton, we're going to cover the Supreme Court as well as the Times, and you're going to do it." And so he called up Griswold and said, "Would you take this fellow for a semester?" That's all they could do. And Griswold said yes. And then Phil hung up the phone and said, "Well, that'll cost me a building of the school." But 4 years later, they promoted Jim, and then the post sent me to Harvard, even though I failed to get a Neiman. I just applied and just didn't get it. It was pretty hard not to get it. I asked Tony for advice as to what to do, because he had really, he totally covered Harvard and the law school. He just knew everything where everybody was buried and everybody was active. And I asked him for advice on courses, and he said, well, courses I took civil procedure, and I took Paul Freund's constitutional law, and Henry Hart's federal courts. And so that's what I did, except that I didn't do one thing that he did. He took exams and got A's in all of them. And I decided, well, even if I got A's in all of that, I would only duplicate it, but I wasn't going to get all A's. So I decided to do something else with that time. But I had the same, I claim the same lineage. I mean, Frankfurter's agitation, and Paul Freund's counseling and mentoring. And Paul Freund said, "You may take my course, all my courses, but you must take Henry Hart's middle course." And of course, a lot of lawyers who come to the court don't know about that course. And people who know about it, the Federalist Society knows it really well, to their profit. A lot of people who have law degrees just don't understand. And this is a Frankfurter concoction. This is the whole federal courts and federal jurisdiction, state jurisdiction structure. So I claim that legacy for myself, and I appreciate that so many of us were beneficiaries of it. Frankfurter, the stories have said that Frankfurter wrote to Scotty Reston that there are not 2 justices on the Supreme Court who know the court better than Tony. He didn't say who the one justice was, but we didn't have to guess who that was. He said there was nobody else on the Supreme Court who understood it as well as Tony. And that was what I was supposed to compete with when after my year at Harvard. So I went with finally with a couple of strikes on me. To my relief, while I was there, Tony was sent to London, and so I was with ordinary competition, to my great relief. It wasn't until I got to Harvard that I read Tony's really great law review article in 1957 about reapportionment. It was a roadmap for litigants how to get to Baker against Carr. And that's what, it was really told them how to do it, and they did it. And then when they finally had it down Baker against Carr, they gave Tony a Pulitzer Prize for that. I always thought it was not so much the story as that he just sort of helped to invent the whole thing. He was just very, very creative, and there was no way to guess what he was doing while you were trying to compete with it. And luckily, I didn't have to. I have one little episode more to tell you, and that was that as I was getting myself ready to go to my year at Harvard, there was an ADA convention in New York, and I went to cover it, and Tony was there. Tony was at a table with some justices of the preeminent people of the bar, and I was at the little press table. And Tony came over to me and he said, Tom Clark would like to meet you. And I was stunned that he did that, and I went and shook hands with Tom Clark. He didn't turn out to be a great source, but it was something to be given. And I always thought that it might be, not always, for some years I thought maybe Tony was going to tell me that he was so confident that no matter who you were, who you were going to be, what kind of reporting you were going to do, he didn't have to worry about you knowing a source of his. He didn't have to, it didn't bother him that he was sharing a source. Jenny asked me how long I plan to serve, to speak. And I said 5, 10, 15. And I said, lots to say. And she said, 5. So I've been trying to give you 5. It's a challenge. And I failed at that. And it's also a privilege to be asked to do Tony justice.